Today we actually have honest LDS critics that are admitting online that I was correct about Rittner and Vogel getting the Abraham facsimiles wrong about Smith's translations. Here we have one of those scholars admitting online that I was correct in my 16th video.
I want to respond to Paul's comment here. Okay, now Paul has been in my comments on one of my Book of Abraham videos, very engaged. I'd say kind of borderline spamming some stuff in the comments on how kind of what I'm saying here is I'm lying or this is easily debunked, things like that. I think that's some other argument that we can have, because I do think that what I'm showing there is clear evidence of what Joseph says that he is translating. But this commenter posts here, I am 100% on his side. And I think this is a really good point. I do want to dig into some of what Dan Vogel has written on this, and I also want to go through, I've got both his and the Rittner book, things like this. I know this is definitely kind of how the CES letter portrays it, but I think he brings up such a good argument here, and that's this. That's talking about, in facsimile number 1, basically these Canopic jars, these 4 Canopic jars, which are, I believe, the 4 sons of Horus. Now, each of these jars, we know from Egyptology what these actually are, that these are made to hold the organs. That's what they're used for. Now, what is wrong, and what Paul is correctly saying here, there's many places where people who are trying to criticize the Book of Abraham, that they will say that the Book of Abraham is naming these gods. And I agree with Paul here that the Book of Abraham is not naming these gods. And so I think what the Book of Abraham is doing, it's not specifically naming these gods, but it is treating them each as separate gods, separate idols of separate people, where we know that these gods were not just kind of individual idols, but this is part of like a bigger religion or a bigger point of view, things like that. So I think what Joseph Smith, or really what the Book of Abraham is saying, is that these are individual idols. Anyway, so this is there's a lot of nuance here, and so, but I agree with this. So let me show you what's in the text here. This is actually really exciting to me. So first of all, we have in this facsimile number 1, this figure C with the black feet. This is Anubis. His head's been cut off and redrawn. We know what the correct translation of this. This is actually Anubis, what it is. But again, how Joseph explained this, he is describing this as the priest of Elkanah, okay? This man, this priest, what Joseph Smith is saying, okay, he's not saying he's Anubis, right? This is where Joseph is wrong. But Joseph is saying that this is the priest of Elkanah. This man's name, this priest's name, is not Elkanah, okay? Now, also, and what this commenter is saying here, and this is, again, I'm going to say it a million times, this is a really good point. When he's labeling these 4 Canopic jars and then this crocodile here, he's labeling these as the idolatrous god of Elkanah, the god of Libnah, okay? That is not the name that he's assigning to each of these idols. He's not saying this idol is called Elkanah. He's saying this is the idol of Elkanah, just like this is the priest of Elkanah, okay? And this here, this crocodile, is the god of Pharaoh. This is not Pharaoh, right? And I don't think anyone's saying that as well. But this is a really good point. I think this is a way that a lot of times that people, and maybe when you look at the infographic, I know the one that maybe I'm thinking of is in the CS letter. I've seen places where it's basically saying the correct translation is these are the 4 sons of Horus, the 4 Canopic jars. You know, where Joseph Smith said that these are, you know, the gods of Elkanah, Libnah, Machmash, and Korash, right? And that's the thing, is like, the Book of Abraham is not actually naming these gods. It's naming who they are gods of. So this is a genuinely really good point. Okay, there's one other place I want to show it, where it's in the text, where it is clear that the Book of Abraham text is not actually naming the name of these individual idols of, yeah. So again, Abraham chapter 1 refers to him as the god of Elkanah, the god of Libnah, and the god of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, right? Like, it's the god that belongs to the Pharaoh. Anyway, and so, and what's interesting on here is it's the priest of Elkanah, and the priest of Elkanah was also the priest of Pharaoh. So again, this priest who's acting this priestly role, who's really Anubis, but he's acting as a priest for Elkanah and a priest for Pharaoh, right? Elkanah and Pharaoh, they are not gods. It's not the name of the Canopic jars. Now, the only place in here, I believe, that I found so far in the Book of Abraham where these idolatrous gods are named is down below. It talks the god of Shangriel, which was the sun. Okay, so the text doesn't talk about who this character Shangriel was or whatever, but the text does seem to be saying that the god that Shangriel worshipped was the sun. That was the god. The sun is not named Shangriel. So anyway, really good point. Now, I think there's a lot of other things you're kind of saying about the Book of Abraham. I think we wildly differ on. For example, there's one of your videos where you go through, and you're basically saying that the whole BYU Egyptology department, that they're all looking at Egyptian wrong, things like that. And it's kind of like that, the position you're taking, Paul, is it's really is you are saying something that is the church isn't saying. Like, I don't think the church is directly addressing these Book of Abraham issues. But you're also kind of putting yourself in a position where you're saying, like, BYU and all them, they're looking at all this Egyptology this certain way, and it's all the wrong way to look at it and things like that. So, to be that lone voice in the wilderness in that way, or to kind of like not rely on the scholarship sort of thing, it is really important to kind of go through and like, it's really important to kind of back up, I think, the things that you say. But I think, and looking at your points, and your video on YouTube is 4 hours long. I'm probably not going to get through it. I am going to spend some time actually looking at it. But yeah, so I do not think that there's a lot of ways that I know the way you look at the Book of Abraham and what Joseph is saying here, yes, you're taking a much different position than what BYU and them the sorts of things are. And so if this for you is a sustainable position, something that is defendable for you, I think that's great. I think that the position that BYU is taking is absolutely not sustainable. Now, even in here where you're talking about kind of how Joseph is explaining, that he's calling these Canopic jars basically for separate idols, and he's naming these all as idols of individuals or things like that. That when we actually know what those are, we know those are Canopic jars. We know they're the four sons of Horus. These are not idols of individuals, but these number one were. I mean, they weren't even necessarily idols, but the four sons of Horus that they represented. This is all part of the same pantheon, right? These aren't idols of individuals. These are shared gods among people. And Joseph Smith there in that figure, he is calling them idols, whereas we know in this scene that they're actually Canopic jars. They're made to basically hold the organs. We know the name of those. But yes, going back, you are making a really good point that the Book of Abraham is not specifically naming those gods. Joseph does not name it. He's just saying that these are the gods that belong to these individuals that Joseph or Abraham never introduces us to in the text that we have. Really, the only person that we have any sort of familiarity with is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and again, Pharaoh being king. That's another kind of goofy thing. But again, I just want to say thank you for this point. And I think you're totally right. And I think a lot of people misread the text that way, and that's something where I think the explanation, to me, the explanation for how Joseph got it wrong, it wasn't that Joseph said that they were these names and they're really these other names. I think that the real thing that Joseph is saying here, it's a little bit more nuanced. I still believe it's wrong. But yes, I think that you are correctly pointing out that Joseph is not saying this thing that critics criticize, right? So a lot of critics that they have this kind of straw man explanation, which is incorrect, and they knock it down. And that's where I agree with you. Now, part two of this, I'm going to get out Dan Vogel's book. I'm going to get out Rittner's book, and I'm going to kind of dig into this. And I'm going to actually see if I can't criticize their positions on there. But that's
On Mormonism Live, many of you heard people calling the show, challenging Vogel and the others to debunk Paul Gregerson's 16th video, and watching them refuse to answer. Thousands are finding out that my 16th video, I was correct. Link Paul Gregerson to get there.